Hello, everyone. This week I want to talk about a little different topic. So, the house I live in, part of it has a crawl space underneath it. Now, I have a lot of animals in the area, so some of the animals, like the cats, and I think the raccoons and skunks are down there as well, are in that crawl space. And while that's fine, I don't mind them being down there. It's not like they impact me in any way being there so far. But the issue I've got is that crawl space is not an insulated space, right? If you look at a bridge come cold weather, right, what do they always tell you? The bridges freeze first. Why? Because the air can get underneath them and over the top. So unlike another roadway where the air can only come over the top of it, it can come underneath as well. What that means for a house that has a crawl space is the floors get cold, because the cold is literally underneath the floor. So it occurred to me that I would need to put something to block off the crawl space that is both flame resistant, obviously, although it's wood all around to begin with. But the other thing I would want it to have is some kind of insulating quality to it and be easily removable. So I started looking at certain things that are fabbed. I mean, you can find these cubes and things like that are fabbed. And I thought, what if we did something a little differently? Now, I've got some foam insulation that I use. Now, it's not the old styrofoam stuff. This is the newer stuff. And it's fairly rigid. And if that were cut into, let's say, a 2-foot piece twice. So I got two 2-foot pieces. And now I take and I cut another pair that are about, let's say, 6 inches. And now I make a box. 2 feet wide, 6 inches deep. Now, why the 6 inches? Well, I might make it 3. But 6 inches gives you an air gap. Now, if you'll notice, if you touch your window in the winter, and it's a single pane glass, you'll notice it's colder than a double pane glass. And the reason for that is cold doesn't go through the air as quickly as it does through the solid glass. By creating these cubes, right, and 3 inches is probably sufficient, considering there's nothing there right now, but by making these cubes up, it gives me a way that I can pop them in and pop them out. I can even go down to a foot, right? Whatever fits your particular situation. Now, my particular situation is that the space underneath is not uniform. Space under the crawl space itself is uniform, but the ground around the outside is not. So that it has to be different heights in different areas. Which also leads me to this modular format. The other thing that I would do is I need to have something on the outside to shield it. Now, I got 2 issues, right? First is those 2 cubes are not going to, they're going to press against each other, but they're not going to be airtight. The other issue is the outside of it needs to be protected. Now, the inside could probably use some protection as well, but I'm not going to worry about the inside part of it. I'm only going to worry about the outside, where the weather is going to get to it. So I find some piece that goes on the outside, and it could be something as simple as a thin plywood, heavily treated to protect it against the weather. Again, these are going to be removable. This whole piece is set up to be removable and everything be replaceable, so that if something should get damaged, pull it off, replace it, put something else in. So if I'm talking about, let's say, a foot by 3 inches deep, so I got a 3-inch gap between the front and back panels of this. On that front panel, 6 inches in on both of the cubes, right? I put a 1-foot, put a 6-inch piece on a 1-foot. I put a 1-foot on a 2-foot. So we'll go with the 1 foot because it's easier to work with. So if I put a 6-inch panel centered on the gap between cube 1 and cube 2, it does two things. There's my outside protection, but it holds the two cubes together and takes care of that gap between the two, right? Now it's not a gap that's open to the outside elements. It's a gap specifically connected to the other cube. So for the first cube, or the last cube, depending on how you want to look at it, that cube is going to need another piece that's going to be, right, we've got a foot, so I need a 6-inch piece there. That'll seal it off. The 6-inch piece that I've got in the middle covers both of them, but because it's 3 inches on each piece, because it's 6 inches, for that end piece, it's going to leave a 9-inch gap that needs to be filled. So that 6-inch piece that I talked about will fit there just fine. However, it's going to leave a 3-inch gap. So there's going to have to be a small 3-inch piece that's going to have to be put in there. And I don't have to worry about the gaps between these pieces because they've got this insulation behind it. So by putting that 6-inch piece across two 1-foot ones, and I do that all the way across, like I said, it ends up taking 3 inches up. So 3 inches of cube 2, and then to hook to cube 3, that's going to take up another 3 inches of cube 2, leaving exactly 6 inches in between. So that 6-inch panel that I'm using everywhere, I can use both for the gap coverage as well as the gap in between the gap coverage. The only time it becomes an issue is on the end pieces. So at the beginning of the strip and the end of the strip, it's going to have an extra 3-inch piece put in there. So anytime that I can't bridge it to the next one, I'm going to end up with a 3-inch piece that I have to put in there in its place. And again, the reason I'm doing it this way is to keep it modular, right? Not only can I take the cubes out, but I can take those front panels off. If the front panels are attached in an easy to remove fashion, then it makes this whole thing very simple to take apart. To take those outside panels off, should they become damaged, water damaged, whatever happens to them, they can be replaced. If the foam behind them gets damaged, well, it's a 1-foot cube, 1 foot by 3 foot, 1 foot by 3-inch cube. I can just take that bridge piece off, pull it out, take off the other pieces that may be on it, like the other bridge piece for the other side or the centerpiece, and put that on the next cube that I make and put in to replace it. So it's easy to take these things in and out. And at the same time, it should afford me more warmth underneath the house. Now, again, like I said, I've got the animals. I have to pay attention to the fact that they're going to try to get under there and get warm, which means creating an area for them to do that, that hopefully they use and don't just make new spots. They have been wanting to do that, so I have to keep that in mind. But again, if they create a new spot, if something gets damaged, I can easily pop in and replace it. So that's what I'm going to do for the next project. It'll be spring sometime. I'm going to have to go around and measure the height going into the crawl space. The other piece I have to keep an eye on is there's a couple of spots that are access points underneath the crawl space to get to certain things. And I have to make sure that those are still available for access. One goes to an electrical outlet that I use. So I have to make sure that I can get to that electrical outlet, for example. So there's a couple things that I'll have to keep in mind when I do that. But again, because it's modular, if I mess up and there's a spot that somebody needs to get to, we can just pop those connector panels off, pull the cube out, and I got a 1-foot spot to go in there. If I think that's too narrow, which it probably is for most people, I can make the whole thing 2 feet each. And now when I pull it out, I'm pulling a 2-foot gap. And 2-foot gap is pretty good for somebody to slide in there and get underneath the crawl space if they need to. Again, they will be a 2-foot length with a 3-inch depth to it. And because they're now 2 feet, the connector panels between panel 1 and cube 1 and cube 2 is going to be a 1-foot panel, half the distance of the panel itself. So if you got a 2-foot, it's a 1-foot gap. You put that 1 foot over it and it covers up the gap in between. It's going to require another 1 foot for the other half of the 2-footer, which again is going to leave a small gap. All right. So between the 2 feet, you've got 24 inches is 2 feet. The 1-footer is going to cut 6 inches into that, leaves 18 inches that have to be addressed. You're going to be putting a panel in there that is, if you make it simple for the cutting, it's a 1-foot panel, and then you're going to have to add another 6 inches. You could make an 18-inch panel. I'm probably just going to get the panels and cut them to the height that they need to be, and then just cut them every foot. And that way I just have a uniform set of panels. I'll have a couple of extras that I've got to use that I can probably get out of scrap if I need to, and that'll take care of the entire project. Again, it'll give a barrier to protect the underneath of the house from the air getting in, the cold air getting in anyway, and it'll protect it from getting that draft underneath that cools the floor, making the house feel cooler than it is because the floor is cool. And again, when we get these really cold days, because the way the house is built, when that floor gets cold, it has a tendency to retain the cold for a while longer because it doesn't have any way to retain any heat or try to warm up. So that's what I got for you guys next week. For this week, that's my next project that I'll be working on, and I'll keep you guys up to date as I go. And I'll talk to you next week.